Beware Maria. Maria talks about music, about biscuits, about music again, and she talks with composers. She speaks with performers, with guitarists, with keyboardists. She talks about dance and she talks about music and about music. So today, this is what Maria, who still finds it quite odd to speak about herself in the third person, is going to be about composing. Recording in progress today with Pedro Finisterra. Pedro, hello, good afternoon.
Hello.
Pedro Finisterra or Pedro, do you have a longer artistic name?
Well, most people call me just Pedro Finisterra, but recently I changed the way that I sign my name to Pedro Laranjeira Finisterra. So I'm using both my mother and my father's last names. Well, because I used to sign just with my father's name, but because actually I'm into music because of my mother, and the talent for music comes from my mother's side. I guess it makes sense that I would also use that name. So.
Oh, wow.
But most people still call me Pedro Finisterra. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah. In Portugal, do you use, like in Spain, we use two surnames? Do you use two surnames, or in Portugal you do one surname?
We do two surnames, but I think in Spain the last surname is the mother's name, whereas in Portugal it's the father's name.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah,
okay.
so my mother's surname is Laranjeira, my father's is Finisterra, and so I'm Laranjeira Finisterra. Yeah.
Oh, wow. I like that. I mean, now you can legally put the surnames in the order you want, but traditionally it's first the father and then the mom in Spain.
Yeah, in Portugal it's like that, but I do know that a few generations ago it used to be that the mother's name goes into her daughters and the father's name goes into their sons. So siblings would have different last names.
Pedro, apart from surnames, would you want to tell us? Pedro is a young composer that I have met many years ago when he was almost a child, a teenager. And I'm so happy to re-encounter him after the years that when I met you, it was in a summer course that he was my student, and now I could be his student.
Oh, no.
So tell us about it. They did a summer course in Portugal where you did jazz two summers. And did any impact on you as a musician or on the idea of wanting to be a composer in the future?
About being a composer, not really, but how my music sounds, definitely.
Really?
Oh, definitely, yes. Well, my music is not improvised, not at all, but the harmonies, the sonorities, the way that I think of how I organize pitches, so musical notes, draws a lot from jazz theory. Maybe not in a very deep way, but at least I like the Gregorian modes that jazz musicians like to use when they improvise, or at least how they taught us how to improvise back when I was a teenager, and that kind of stuck. Yeah.
Do you still improvise?
Yes, all the time. I like to improvise. Mostly nowadays I just improvise on my piano or in my Lumatone, which is a new instrument that I bought, like a very special keyboard instrument for microtones and things. Yeah.
Microtones and things. I like that. I do microtones and things. Pedro, you studied composition in Guildhall School of Music.
Yes, and before that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, I studied at Kilo, but before that I also studied in Lisbon. Lisbon. 2 schools, yeah.
Yeah. And what are you doing now?
Now I'm doing a doctorate, also at Guildhall, with Julian Anderson, Malcolm Singer, and Mira Benjamin. And my research is on making music based on these alternative ways of tuning, these alternative tuning systems that are not based on the division of the octave in 12 parts, but on a different number of parts. I like tuning systems where the musical intervals are all evenly spaced. That's it's a thing that it's not necessarily for a musical reason, but I like it conceptually, and then I like to explore sonorities with those tuning systems. And so that's very good for electronics or for special instruments that are tuned to these tuning systems. But I mean, I'm a classical composer, and I like to write for violins, for flutes, for pianos, for the normal classical instruments. And so my research is on how I can adapt these tuning systems or fake them in a way that is convincing and musically interesting. And so those two pieces that I sent you relate to that a little bit.
Yes, and we
Not
look
a little bit,
forward.
completely.
We look forward to listen to this. Which one would you like that we play first?
Maybe the choral piece, which is the first that I wrote.
The choral, please. Okay, what
Yeah.
can you tell us about it?
This piece, which is called Babel, it's about the Tower of Babel, and it's a piece that I wrote 2 years ago in a workshop in New York. This was a workshop with a choir named Choral Chameleon, and it was a workshop for composers to write a piece in 1 week and then have it performed, workshopped and performed by Choral Chameleon. And so, because they wanted us to send the poem that we were going to use when we applied for this workshop, I spoke with a writer that I'm good friends with, Edward Einhorn, for which I already worked with him in an opera back here in London. We did a master course in opera making, and he was a writer, I was a composer, and we worked together. And he's also from New York, actually. He's the one that gave me a place to stay during the workshop. And so I decided to use a poem that he wrote, which was about the Tower of Babel. And the poem, if you look at the poem, you could almost imagine it as if there's like 5 sentences there. And then you imagine you take those sentences, you print them a lot of times, you cut bits of those sentences, and then you just put them in a I don't know, in a cup or something. You just mix them all together and take out the bits of paper again and put them in a random order, and the poem kind of looks like that. And I like I like the poem exactly that way. And so I thought, okay, so recently I had this opportunity to study abroad, and I met lots of people that are from different countries, and this poem is about the Tower of Babel. I could just contact all my international friends and ask them to translate the poem into their languages, and then use those translations in the piece. And so the idea of the piece was exactly this sort of internationalistic idea of starting from one language and then including translations that everyone that was kind enough to send me translations. So I asked them to translate the poem, and if they could read it out loud, so I could try to help the choir to speak all those languages. Of course, the choir also had people that spoke those languages, so that made things easier. But yeah, and then the piece, when I wrote that piece, I was already applying for the doctorate that I'm doing now, so I wanted to use these ideas of tuning systems there, even though it's for a choir, so I had to make some compromises. And I had this idea of, when I looked at the Bible and read the passage about the Tower of Babel, I saw, if I'm not mistaken, I saw that it was on, I think it was Genesis 11, Numbers 1 through 9. I think that was it. So 11 and 9.
If you were confused, I wouldn't be able to notice. So.
And so it was from 11 to 9. And so I had this idea of like, I can just, if you imagine 11 as being a major 7th, so if you go to the piano, start with a note and then count 10 notes after that, we get a major 7th. So I could divide it in from 1 to 9 parts, and so that was the idea for the pitches. And then I just approximated them to semitones and quarter tones, and the piece is basically me playing around with these scales that you never hear actually, but they're the raw materials to derive the musical notes, and then the rest is just the languages and these sonorities that are strange, and this idea that people don't really because in the story of the Tower of Babel, because people are trying to build this tall tower, and then God doesn't want them to do that, and so makes them speak different languages, and so they cannot understand each other. I wanted this piece to sound very mysterious, very eerie, very confusing. So this piece, well, if you feel a bit uncomfortable hearing this piece, that's what I'm aiming
That's what
for. Yeah, that you don't understand what's happening. What is this? I don't understand anything. What are these sonorities and all that? That's the kind of like dark, eerie, mysterious aura that I was looking for.
Let's go for it. Verstehst du mich?
Verstehst du mich? Verstehst du mich? Verstehst du mich?
Pedro, it would be very satisfactory for you as a composer to see that people is performing your work. How does it feel? Is it you get used to it, or is it so exciting every time?
It's always an adventure each time. It's such a, how should I say? It's always a new experience. I like to I like to spend my time alone writing the piece, and just the act of writing the piece and doing research for it, or looking for, I don't know, whatever I do to make the piece. I really like that. But then when I have the piece performed, it becomes its own thing. It has its own life, and I let go of some things, but some other things that the performers bring to it give it a new richness. So it's always a fascinating experience.
Okay, so tell us about the next piece.
Okay. So the next piece is called "Dreams from an Old Memory," and this piece. Okay, so I wrote this piece whilst I was already doing this research, and so I had already planned which pieces I was going to do in my research, right? And I wanted to make a piece for electric piano, because if I can use an electric piano, I can tune it to whatever system I want without making any compromises. I'll only do them if I really want them to. And so when I was experimenting with different tuning systems in that piece, there were some sonorities that I found really interesting, but I was super confused as to what's going to be the form of this piece, how I'm going to develop the material, what I'm going to do. And at some point, as I was making experiments, I found that with a particular material that I came up with, I could almost recreate a melody from the Stasimon chorus of Euripides' Orestes, which is an ancient play from classical Greece. And I already knew that piece from my from music history classes, and that piece, that melody is as it's. I knew a version that was microtonal, another one that wasn't, and I had this when I was a teenager. I had this fascination about ancient Greek music, and it was a eureka moment where just something that I really enjoyed when I was a teenager, and something that I really enjoy now, kind of like came together. And so I had to use it somehow. And so because I was using a sonor material that came from ancient Greece, and I'm using modern instruments and new tuning systems, I kind of saw these, how should I say, present, past, and future coming together. And the sonority that I was being able to create this sounded also very dreamy, very a bit surrealistic, because it sounded familiar in some parts but sounded very different in others, as if I was looking at a surrealistic painting. And so the title "Dreams from an Old Memory" came from dreams, as in imagining things for the future, but also from an old memory, because these are materials that come from the past, from thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago. And so "Dreams from an Old Memory" comes from that idea of old memory, dreaming of the future, and this piece comes together more or less into that.
I found it very atmospheric, and let's go for it. Pedro, about composing, what is next?
Right now, I'm finishing a string quartet, my first one, which is, I guess, even more surrealistic as this other piece that we listened to. And I'm going to start writing a guitar quartet, which is my first instrument, the first instrument that I started playing. I kind of left the guitar for many years, and well, I had my reasons back then, but now I'm rediscovering the guitar in a new light, and it's strange. It's almost kind of a past and present coming together again. But the idea that I have for this piece now is for it to be a kind of an hypothetical first prayer. So I haven't been religious for a while, but I guess through music I started being interested in some stories from the Talmud or from the Talmud or the Torah or as Christians call it the first Testament or the Old Testament, and I used some of these stories in music in some of my music. That piece for choir for an instance. and doing these explorations of religious texts, not necessarily Christian texts. That's Portugal is a Catholic country, and my references of what religion is are mostly Catholic. But I guess I always found the Old Testament way more interesting than the New Testament, and so these stories kind of have, like, I don't know, this aura around them that I find them super interesting. And so this experience of working with these texts also changed, I guess, how I see religion, how I see people in the world in a way. And so this piece would be a kind of an hypothetical first prayer that I would do. And so the idea would be that this piece would mirror some questions that I have about the world and what would be God's place there, and some of the things that I find how should I say, some of the injustices that I see in the world, that I find it confusing how a God could exist. So many atrocities can happen in the world and God still exists, and he struggled with the idea that, well, if God is omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, and all these tragedies are happening all the time, and he has the power to do anything about it, then he cannot be good. But because he refuses to believe that God cannot be good, then God cannot be omnipotent. So he can know what's happening, he can see everything, but he cannot act on it. And so he needs people to act his will in a way. And so that's how he could, how should I say, reconcile this idea of, like, how can God be good and not being able to act on these things. And so I guess this piece more or less is inspired by that dilemma that it had. I found these ideas so powerful that I wanted to use it in my music.
I think we were coming to an end today. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank
And come back when you want.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and to everybody else who is there, you will listen this for once a week, and then it will become podcast that you can find in Spotify and everywhere Maria. See you tomorrow. See you next week.